Hi, I'm Harold Munro, editor-in-chief at the Vancouver Sun and Province, joined by our City Hall columnist, Dan Fumano. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Harold.
So this past week, you found yourself writing about some interesting situations at two metro cities. Of course, Vancouver, where we have a spat between the park board and council, and then the city of or municipality of Delta. I think to me, what's interesting here is you've got two mayors in Ken Sim and George Harvey, who both swept to power in their respective municipalities, winning every seat that they ran for on
Yeah.
council and park board. And
Yep.
again, on council in Delta, he won every seat. So if you had to ask me after that election what the next 4 years were going to be like, I would think, well, it's pretty smooth sailing for both mayors on both
Yeah.
fronts. But now they're both running into some troubled waters. So what's going on?
Yeah, as you say, well, the Delta thing, kind of came came as a surprise, at least to us. And
Sure.
Mayor George Harvey said it was a surprise to him as well. So this was at last Monday's Delta Council meeting, right at the end of the meeting, with sort of no prior public notice or anything. This group of four councillors from the mayor's, as you say, from the mayor's own party, they basically introduced a series of motions that had the effect of sort of limiting the power of the mayor's office and putting some controls on what the mayor's office can do, and also removing Harvey from the board of Metro Vancouver. So he will no longer serve as one of Delta's two representatives at the Metro Vancouver board. And this has kind of bigger regional implications because Harvey was actually the chair of the Metro
Right.
Vancouver board, which is like $100,000 a year kind of role in addition to his salary and role as the mayor of Delta. So his removal, the removal of his directorship, also means there will be a change in leadership at Metro. So, um, so that was kind of a big surprise. And like we say, the councillors behind this move all ran with the mayor's Achieving for Delta party. They all ran on a slate together, and that slate swept the election, winning every single seat on council. So these changes are coming from the mayor's one-time allies. But obviously there seems to have been some kind of a falling out there.
Yeah, we don't
Um,
have a lot of detail there, right? They're making broad statements about
yeah,
the mayor um, trying to control things out of his office, control
yeah,
council agendas, control the messaging. I guess the one specific thing is that he, according to them at least, commissioned a report, a study on crime at Delta Port, and
yeah.
then went and released it again without them knowing.
Yeah. I mean, initially after this meeting Monday night, these counselors who were kind of behind these moves, they put out just a really brief, vague statement. And initially, they said they were not going to be answering questions about it. They said they were going to leave it at that statement. And so they basically, for a couple of days, refused to answer any questions or explain themselves to the public or the media. They had said they said publicly that they were doing this because they had lost confidence in the mayor's ability, uh, but then were refusing to provide any explanation for what caused them to lose that confidence. A few days later, they did release some more information and start talking to the media. But yes, it was also kind of a surprise because it wasn't as though there was a really obvious record of sort of a policy divergence or political kind of
Right.
misalignment. They seemingly had been voting together on most of the big issues in Delta. It's not as though they were at odds on some major decisions or directions, at least not publicly. They've been, for the most part, voting together as a block. So from the outside, it kind of,
Right.
yeah,
And we don't know how this will affect or won't affect the functionality of Delta Council going forward. But
yeah,
I don't know if we could draw the same connections, but we see what's happened in Vancouver, where Mayor Ken Sim appears to have miscalculated it, at least in terms of the time it would take
yeah,
the province to approve his plan to get rid of the park board and
Yeah.
take over park control of the council. He thought that would happen quickly in this legislative session. It hasn't. And now after this week, there'll be no legislative session until after the next election. So assuming he has a friendly government, we're still probably realistically almost a year away at best from
Potentially,
this
yeah.
changing. And so he has, again, ABC councilors or ABC commissioners who've turned on him.
Yeah.
And we saw a very serious disconnect play out last week over a
Yeah.
massive waterfront reimagining, right?
Yeah. This is a good, this decision or this series of decisions, first by the park board and then council, and then sort of the public war of words about it, is kind of a good illustration of this disalignment between these two elected bodies. As you say, ABC, in 2022, it ran such a dominant campaign that they got all 6 of their park board commissioners elected. So they had 6 out of 7 seats on park board, and they got all of their council candidates. So they've got this super majority on council as well. So in theory, you had a situation where ABC has the super majority on park board, super majority on council, and you'd think they would be in alignment. But of course, that majority on park board disappeared almost instantly after Sim announced his plan last December to get rid of the elected park board. 3 of the ABC commissioners stuck with the party and said they support the mayor's plan to abolish this elected body. 3 of the commissioners that were formerly with ABC quit the party together. And so now you kind of have a situation where there's the 3 independents who are former ABC commissioners form a sort of 4-vote majority with the 1 green commissioner. And that's what happened with this West End plan. So this is it's a plan that's been in the works for years. City staff and park board staff have been working on this for years. And it would sort of guide the transformation of the next 30 years of the West End waterfront. So, so everything kind of between the Burrard Bridge and Stanley Park. So including English Bay and some other sort of, iconic public spaces in Vancouver. And so the park board supported it with the ABC commissioners voting against it, but the slim majority there did endorse this vision at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. And then just last week when it came to council, the ABC majority shot it down. They said, we're not approving it at this time. This $300 million vision is just out of touch with the city's financial realities. Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young, who is in her 2nd term, and she represents ABC and kind of spoke for the ABC majority on this one. And she's also a former park board commissioner herself. And she said that you could kind of see her and the other ABC councillors kind of using this as an example to point out why we shouldn't have this elected park board that can make decisions about plans or approve visions, but can't actually do things without council's funding approval. Kirby-Young said that she was frustrated when she was on park board. It felt like the department of making plans and not the department of getting things done and taking action, because they could approve plans, but then they may or may not happen. And she was saying that in her view, this was a fantasy land plan with no clear way to fund it. This $300 million. And she said at a time when the city's got a $500 million infrastructure deficit and we've got all these other financial pressures, she said it was just a pie in the sky kind of fantasy plan. So that's kind of the explanation for why ABC.
I mean, we should say that there was, as you pointed out, there was one ABC councillor who didn't vote with the PAC, wasn't there? Or did they?
Well, the ABC councillors all voted together to not approve the plan, but there was one piece of the plan that they actually did approve. They said, so as an exception to item A, we're going to single out this one piece of the plan, which is reintroducing 2-way car traffic on part of Beach Avenue alongside a new bike lane. So that one piece of the plan, which it gets a bit complicated, but Councillor Christine Boyle, who represents one city, one of the 3 councillors not affiliated with ABC, she had tried to introduce an amendment that would change that, and that failed. But anyway, the final vote on this car traffic bike lane question was supported by the ABC majority, but one ABC councillor, Rebecca Bly, voted against her council colleagues. And so you had the 3 non-ABC councillors as well as Bly voting against the ABC majority. ABC the majority still passed it. And that was notable because it's really one of only a handful of times so far this term that I've seen the any of the ABC councillors vote kind of in opposition. It's happened a few times. There's been a few, but sometimes it's been split. Sometimes you've got one dissenting or two dissenting ABC councillors. So it's really kind of happened only a handful of times. They almost always vote as a block together, much in the same way Vision did when they had a majority, for years. So ABC, it's not shocking that they usually vote as a block. But anyway, so this was a notable instance of that. And when I reached out to Councillor Bly and asked her, if she could elaborate on her vote, because she didn't say anything in the public meeting, she just cast her vote. And she thought about it, and she said she declined. She didn't want to explain her vote. So the vote speaks for itself, I guess, but at least for now. So yeah, it was, noteworthy. It wasn't a huge piece of the overall thing, but it was noteworthy in that you did have an ABC councillor voting against their caucus colleagues.
Okay. I think I'm sure some people watching this are wondering, well, why should I care? Isn't it better to have people who, I'm not necessarily about the ABC, but the situation in Delta, isn't it better if we get away from block voting and have people debate things at council meetings? And I guess there's something to be said for that. I guess it does become an issue, though, if people are constantly expending all their energy politicking and fighting against each other, which I think you and I have both seen that over the years in different councils, where you have a mayor who's out of step with their council.
So yeah, I mean, the last Vancouver council, the previous term, was kind of an example of that, where it was the most kind of mixed council that Vancouver's had in decades, probably, because no single party had a majority. You had, I think 5 different political affiliations on there: Cope, Green, NPA, then ABC, One City, and an independent mayor. So you had this diverse council where on any given vote, it was really like you didn't know what was going to happen. And so those meetings would often be very long. They were often described as dysfunctional, including by some of the people on council. But in their defense, they would say, well, this is more genuinely democratic. You are seeing us in the open, negotiating, trying to convince each other, making amendments to amendments. It was sometimes painful to watch. The meetings were often drawn out, but the mayor and some of the councillors said, yeah, but it's messy, but it's genuine. Like it's more transparent than if you have a small group of people deciding behind closed doors. Here's what we're going to approve, in this public meeting tomorrow. We're going to do this. But we definitely had that last term in Vancouver, and it was that kind of approach where everyone is free to vote on any which thing, and there's no kind of cohesive party kind of discipline. It had its detractors and supporters, that style of governance.
Right. All right. Well, we'll have to see how it plays out in Delta, and then I guess we're still on pause, waiting to see what happens with Park Board until after the next.
Yeah, I mean, all indications. The Premier, if the BC NDP forms government again, Premier David Eby has said he's committed to following through on Vancouver Council's request and moving to abolish the elected Park Board, which of course would make Vancouver function the same way that the vast majority of other cities in BC and across Canada function, where they don't have a separate, unique, independent body elected to oversee the parks. So every indication is that will happen, but obviously, as you mentioned, it has not happened on the timeline that Sim initially expected and said he was counting on. He thought it was going to be done within a couple of months and be finished kind of by early this year, and obviously that's not the case. It'll happen after the election. If all goes according to plan for the BC NDP, if they are able to form government again.
All right, good. All right, thanks, Dan. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, Harold.